January 10th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. First, we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. First off, we're going to start with the open forum. Now we're going to have public comment on the agenda items individually, but this is just a general open forum where citizens can comment on governance issues over which the city of Nacogdoches has domain. In accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, members of the commission shall not discuss, deliberate, or make any decisions on topics which are not posted as an agenda item. The speaker should address all remarks to the commission and limit the remarks to no more than 3 minutes. If there's anyone who'd like to make a comment in the open forum, please come up.
Matt Moore, 216 New Church Street. I watched some of y'all's meetings this weekend in the rain, and I'm kind of sad about the agenda items that where y'all approved the variance for the height of the sign increase. The letter that y'all had prepared talking about a design criteria for the I-69 corridor. You'd also talked about how the world has totally changed because of the internet, smartphones, and technology. And the best I could tell, the reason for that great height of that sign, which sets a precedent for anybody that wants a height sign there, is because the big trucks would have to quickly change over to a new lane so they could exit in time to get more diesel. I can't imagine that there's not multiple apps for the phone, like Truck Stop for Us. People are prepared for that. I mean, they monitor these trucks where they're going. They tell the drivers when they have to stop driving. And the idea that we're going to, as we're moving forward, I believe you all talked about how the I-69 corridor, it's gateway to Nacogdoches. Is that the terminology used in the letter? Something to that effect. Maybe that's what the Planning Commission and Council and staff sees for the 69 corridor is the equivalent of I-10 east of Houston or something. I don't. I'd encourage you to go drive on the east part of the loop, maybe on Park Street, and just look how beautiful it is with all the trees that are there that haven't been cut down and mowed down. And as you envision that part of the I-69 corridor, that you consider 50-foot or 75-foot setback, a vegetative buffer, if you will, so that as people drive through there, they see a beautiful area. Now, will it change immediately? No. Should we have done it in 1970? Yes. But I don't know how wide the easement is now. I don't know how wide it will have to be. I don't know what will have to be taken. But I would encourage that. And I don't know why you approved that sign variance. Now, basically, anybody can just come in. Well, you gave them a sign variance, and now you can give us a sign variance too, because we want people to be able to see our business. So, thanks for your time.
Like a little. I've never turned that on before. You can look at it.
It's muted somehow, so it's got the red light on.
Yeah, sure.
Is it connected to the laptop? No, it's different.
That's why I'm letting you do it.
We do have IT on the meeting, and so let's give them a minute or two and see if they can fix it remotely.
There has to be a button, because all these have buttons, except this one, so it's gotta be inside or something.
You know, like the.
I like to keep it live.
We use one of those.
That'll work.
Thank you, MacGyver.
All right. Any other comments for the open forum? Okay, we're moving on to the work session. It's a presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding an educational series on comprehensive planning and community visioning.
All right, thank you, Elena Helton, City Planner. Staff would like to actually request to postpone this work session to the February meeting based on the agenda and the amount of public input and public response that we anticipate during this evening's meeting. We'd like to just push those out a month each. This is the new proposed schedule you see in yellow. We'll republish the flyer online and promote it so we make sure that everyone knows that these meetings have been amended as far as the new schedule. And that concludes staff's presentation
Okay,
for
great.
this item.
We'll table it till February. Sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Consent agenda, number 5 on the agenda. There's first the approval of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And then technically, since both of these are on our consent agenda, we can enact these in one motion. So if there's no edits to the minutes, then we do still need to hear about the final plat for lots 1 to 3, block 1 of the Lake Forest subdivision, section 2, located on the southwest corner of Lake Forest Drive and Englewood Drive. Why don't we go ahead and hear that, and then we'll talk about the minutes.
So for final plats that require approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission but meet all of the subdivision regulations, typically those will be put on the consent agenda. So we won't actually do a presentation like we do for some of our other plats that you've heard where there's a waiver required. So essentially, we can approve all the items on the consent agenda as one. For this particular item, it is a final plat. The property is zoned single family. It meets all of the subdivision regulations for zoning and utilities and the subdivision ordinance. So staff does recommend approval. And with that concludes staff's presentation. Unless the commission has any questions.
I don't have any questions. Any questions from anybody else?
No questions.
Okay. Any edits to the minutes? All right, if none, we'll accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve?
A second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, it passes unanimously. All right, moving on to the regular agenda. Down to B, we didn't have anything removed from the consent agenda, so we're gonna go to public hearing on a zone change from R2 single family to R4 multifamily for lot 36A, City Block 48, located on the north side of Harris Street, approximately 200 feet west of Burke Street. The request has been submitted by Guadalupe Salinas of Universal Construction and Remodeling LLC, and its case file ZON 2021-08.
Did you still want to,
Yeah.
recuse
Is,
yourself?
I don't see,
I don't see him in attendance.
okay.
He's not here.
Well, then we're gonna have a hearing on it. I'm recusing myself. Mr. Salinas is a client of mine, so I'm gonna recuse myself from both this and the next public hearing, C. So, Mr. Mills, it's all yours.
All right, thank you. So I did want to let the commission know that earlier this evening, we actually received a withdrawal letter from the applicant for both this item and the following zone change on Harris Street. So the applicant has requested to withdraw their application formally. We emailed that to you. There's also a printed copy at your packet. We've advertised for the meeting, so we still have to hold the public hearing this evening and the public hearing at City Council on January 18th. But the applicant has requested to withdraw their application altogether. So we'll go ahead and go through the presentation material, but just wanted to let the commission know ahead of time that they have withdrawn. So for this particular item, like you described, it is for a property located on the north side of Harris Street, just east of Burke Street. This property is zoned R2 single family. The request is for R4 multifamily. This area of Harris Street includes a mixture of zoning districts and different land uses. On the hard corner of Harris and Burke, just east of the property is zoned R4. Property immediately to the west is zoned R3, which is two family. The remainder of the property in the area is zoned R2 single family. There is a planned development that you see in orange. That's that senior housing property, and then just west of that is the senior center. But other than that, primarily the property or the general area is zoned and developed for single-family uses. The area is designated as single-family residential on the future land use plan, and single-family residential is described as a single-family, primarily a single-family development. It also includes duplex. It also includes amenities associated with single-family development, such as community facilities, parks, things like that that serve the single-family subdivision. These are some site photos of the subject property. And so in this photo, you can see the zoning sign that staff puts on the property. The property is vacant. And then in the background to the left, you can see there's an existing single-family home. And just to the right, there's another single-family home that border each side of the property. This is just another photo, still standing on Harris Street, but it's looking more east towards Burke Street. So you can see that existing single-family home that we just referenced, and then there's a driveway. This is another photo of the property to the east of the proposed zone change, just a more zoomed-in picture of that home, just to give you an idea of some of the existing development character in the area. So as far as notifications, this application was subject to the 200-foot written letters that we send to all the property owners within 200 feet. We also placed a zoning sign on the property, and then we sent postcards to all the property owners within 500 feet. As far as the number of notices that we actually sent, we sent 12 written notices to people located in the 200-foot buffer. And when we amended the staff report, we had received 4 contacts at that time. There were 3 contacts that were actually written letters in opposition, and then a phone response with general questions. Since that time, we've actually received additional contacts, and we emailed those to you, and we also placed them in your packet. And they included 3 additional written letters of opposition, and so those are from all the adjacent property owners to the north, east, west, and south. And so we'll talk about those in just a minute. One of the issues that came up, and I just wanted to take a moment to address it, is that whenever we're creating these mailing lists to notify the property owners in the area of a zone change, we use the most recent data from the most recent tax roll. And so in this regard, that would be the Nacogdoches Central Appraisal District. And so we actually download their data into our system, and our GIS department integrates that into our mapping. And so that's what we use to create these mailing lists to identify all of those property owners within the 200-foot area. This is also required by code. So our zoning ordinance actually states that we're to use this data whenever we're creating these lists. One of the issues that can come up from time to time is that the Central Appraisal District, they update their data quarterly. So every 3 months, they will update their website with current ownership information. This is done at the beginning of the month. And so for this particular item, the last update was January 1st. The update before that was October 1st. And so there were a couple of properties that were purchased between October 1st and in mid-December, whenever we created the mailing list. Those were the properties located just to the east and the north. Because they were purchased within that time frame, they didn't get included in the update, so we didn't have the current information. Because we placed the zoning sign on the property now, those property owners were made aware of it, and as soon as we were contacted by them, we sent them the forms for them to complete. They filled them out, and their opposition letters are included in the information in the staff report and in the calculation for the 200-foot area. And I'm going to take a moment to just talk about that too. So whenever we have a zone change, the ordinance outlines the procedure for property owners to submit opposition. And so the ordinance says that if you have 20% of the adjacent property owners of a zone change submit a written response in opposition, then that actually requires an approval of that zone change to be done by a supermajority vote of City Council. So in this case, it would be 4 out of 5 votes for approval of the zone change in order for it to take effect. There is some criteria, so the protest must be in writing, and that can be email. So several of these were submitted via email. That does count as in writing, and they have to be signed by 20% of the property owners of the area within that 200-foot buffer. And I'll show you a visual to kind of demonstrate what that area is. So whenever we're looking at that 20% rule in the land area that we count towards the 20%, that's the boundary of the property that's actually proposed for the zone change itself. So the area between that and the area between that and the 200-foot buffer. So that yellow area that you see that's indicated by the black arrows, that's the land area that we use whenever we're calculating the 20% and looking at the written opposition that we've received for that request. And so for this particular area, we have the areas in blue. That's the properties that we've actually received written opposition. And so this does trigger that 20% threshold. And so when it goes before City Council, it will require that supermajority vote. Now, the applicant has already withdrawn their application, but if they hadn't, then it would require 4 out of 5 council votes to make the zone change effective. So I just wanted to go through that quickly because I know there were a lot of questions presented to council and the commission, and wanted to provide that information just for the benefit of the public as well. And there were also letters and contacts for people that were outside that area, and those were included, but whenever we're using the 20% calculation, this is that area that is required. So as far as conditions for approval of the zone change, those were outlined in the amended staff report, but we will go through them. So the first one is compatibility. And so when we look at compatibility, we look at the surrounding zoning and land use. Like I said, the area is primarily zoned and developed as R2 single family. There is some mix of uses with the senior housing development and the senior center located on the south side of Harris Street to the west. But other than that, it is primarily developed as single family. With that, staff finds that the multifamily zoning isn't compatible. Even though there's multifamily zoning immediately east of the property, the developed uses are primarily single family. And so based on that and based on the input that we received from the community, staff is going to be recommending denial of the zone change to multifamily. We do think that R3 duplex could be appropriate because the lot essentially is only large enough to develop a single duplex, and the impact of that would be much more minimal than a multifamily zoning, which would allow someone to build multiple structures with multiple units attached. And so staff does find that the request is not compatible with the surrounding area. As far as orderly growth and development, the second criteria, all the surrounding properties are developed. So the request, if it was approved, wouldn't necessarily affect the orderly growth and development. There are supporting facilities. There's water and sewer utilities located along Harris Street. As far as drives and parking, the property is undeveloped, and so all future driveways or parking would have to comply with our current standards. As far as nuisances, whenever you have multifamily development that's built adjacent to single family, there are some protections in place as far as abiding by the same setbacks as the adjacent zoning, and then actually providing a screening fence and buffer whenever you have multifamily adjacent to single family zoning. As far as lighting, all new lighting would have to comply with our current standards, which is down lighting. We don't allow spillover lighting or up lighting. For landscaping, all multifamily development does have to comply with commercial district landscaping, so that's planting street trees along the frontage road. For the comprehensive plan compatibility, again, the future land use is single family, and so no multifamily zoning request is not in compliance with the future land use map. And for the thoroughfare plan, this is a residential street, so it could accommodate additional residential development. And like I said earlier, as far as notices, we mailed 12 notices. Whenever we sent you the packet, we had 4 contacts. So far in total, now there are 7, all of those being in opposition of their request. And so in conclusion, staff does recommend denial of the zone change to multifamily. However, we do think that a lower, less intense zoning category of R3 could be appropriate, and the applicant has withdrawn their application altogether. So as far as the request, staff would recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission actually accept the withdrawal from the applicant. And when we take this forward to City Council on January 18th, we'll also be recommending that they accept the withdrawal. With that, I know there's a lot of people from the community who have attended the meeting to speak, and so we'd like to open it up for questions and then open the public hearing for public comment. The applicant is not in attendance. However, we did provide printed copies of the letter that he submitted this afternoon withdrawing. So unfortunately, we don't have him present to answer questions, but I'll try to answer any questions best I can.
I've got a few questions.
All right.
Put on just Hello, there it is. The 20% rule, Elena, have we
Yes.
ever, it's new to me, so are you familiar with it? And has it been used before?
Yes, it hasn't been used since my tenure here, but I know there's been other cases where 20% of the property owners have submitted written opposition, and it's required a supermajority vote by City Council. I don't have that list offhand, I apologize, but I know it has happened before. And I've seen it happen in other cities as well, especially whenever you have a zone change to more intense land use than what's developed in the area.
Good to know. And you said email is acceptable?
Yes.
Email is acceptable.
Yeah, so we did actually receive, I think, one physical written paper. Everything else was email, even, photos of the written response form emailed. That's sufficient. It doesn't have to be postmarked in the mail. We will accept electronic written correspondence.
And last question. If an owner owns multiple properties that's in the affected area, do they get to oppose for each property that they own?
So it's of the land area. So if you see, the blue are the properties that the owner submitted written response. And so if you had one property owner that owned all 3, well, that still counts because it's the land area that's counted. It's not the number of property owners, it's the land area. So whether you have 20 lots or 3 lots, it's a sum of the land area, not necessarily the number of land owners. Does that make sense? So that's how it's calculated. So, that large blue lot that's just north of the red, even if, that's one lot, if it was broken up into 5, it would still count the same because it's the area that we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Elaine?
All right, I'll pull up the zoning map for the public comment portion, and do we want to go ahead and open the public hearing first? All right. Excuse me.
The applicant has withdrawn, but we will hear public comments at this time. If you would like to come up and speak for, against, you may come and give us your name and your comments. And it's been asked that we do this in 3 minutes. You may come. For each individual.
Hi, I'm Maggie Forbes, and I live at 607 Burke Street. And I just wanted to start by showing my appreciation for all of you that very timely responded to my reaching out. I know I called everyone but Mr. Deppich or emailed them, and you all responded very quickly, and I had lovely conversations with two of you, so I just want to say how much I appreciate that. And I appreciate what you do as volunteers, and I know it's not easy because you make decisions that make people mad and so on. But anyway, I have a long list of reasons here why I'm against this zoning. My husband and I, we own that little yellow house that was in a lot of the properties, pictures, and we also live about 300 feet away, and when we look out our front door, that's what we see. But in light of the withdrawal, what I'm concerned about now is all of the energy and effort that's been put into having all these people show up and formulate opinions about what they want to see happen in their neighborhood. I'm afraid that if they're not heard and some conclusion isn't reached regarding how people in this neighborhood feel about these zoning changes, that this applicant can come back maybe when everybody's on vacation or is burned out or there's another pandemic, and submit the same application, and then we have to go through all of this again. So I know that, I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but maybe it would be better to just do a denial with prejudice so that we don't have to revisit this in 6 months. Yeah, I'll come back.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Forbes. So the commission, it is your prerogative to accept the withdrawal from the applicant, or you can move forward with a recommendation for denial, which means if this zone change is brought back to the commission within a year, or it means that it can't be brought back within a year unless there's been some substantial change in circumstances in the area or the property, or it's a different type of zone change. And so again, City Council would have to do the same. Deny the application versus accepting the withdrawal. And so that way there would be that year between when they can actually resubmit unless there's been a substantial change or the application is different. And that's the denial with prejudice that Ms. Forbes was just referring to. So,
Thank you,
any questions about that? Yes.
Okay, I think I have about 2 minutes left. Okay, and I know that my neighbors out here who are more articulate than I have similar reasoning, but I just want to say that this is a single-family neighborhood. It's a nice area of Harris Street, and multiple families, whether it's duplexes or apartments or townhouses, it will degrade our neighborhood. And I know Mr. Salinas builds very nice houses. In fact, he built this lovely house at the end of Margaret Street, which is about a block and a half away from the requested zoning change. The lovely White House. I understand that it sold for over $200,000. This is the kind of infilling that we want. It raises property values, it's consistent with the neighborhood, and it's nice. So that's what we want from Mr. Salinas. I know that they make a little more money with multiple family units, but the problem is and they're nice to begin with, but in 10 or 20 years, when the developers and the investors are tired of investing in them and they're fully depreciated, they become more like the property on Harris Street down that's across from the other zoning change, and I'm sure that you've seen that in my pictures of the other, yeah. I mean, I can pull up the pictures of that, but almost everybody's gonna talk about that. It's abandoned, it's not taken care of, and we don't want that. We love our neighborhood, we've invested in it. This is a major investment for most property owners, and we don't want to see it degraded. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have anyone else that would like to speak for or against?
My name is Kayla Criddle, and I live at 413 Harris Street, which is the property directly across from the lot.
My family has owned that house for, I mean, probably 20 years, if not more. I actually lived in the home that was on the vacant lot prior to the house that we live in at 413. So I've been in this neighborhood since I was little. My only concern about bringing in multifamily homes is that it's going to increase the crime in our area. We have a very quiet neighborhood. We rarely have any problems. We can leave doors unlocked if we want. Not that it's a good idea, but we could. And then another thing is that when you bring in a multifamily home, you've now got school districts that have more children coming in and out of the school district, because when that lease is up, there's no guarantee they're going to stay. They may find somewhere that's cheaper for them or better fit for them. So these kids are now going to be moving to different school districts every time. And then it's also going to produce less revenue for the local government with having multifamilies. So with my home being directly across the street, I would step out of my door and I would see this multifamily home every single day. It would also create trouble for me backing out of my driveway if the parking gets over full from guests at these multifamilies, because now sometimes even when we have guests at other houses, you kind of have to maneuver through, and I just don't want to have to maneuver through a multifamily home trying to back out of my driveway safely. Then the last thing is the safety for the seniors that are in our area, because they go to the Nacogdoches Senior Center daily. They have lunches there, they have Zumba, they have all kinds of things that they can do there. And by adding multifamily, they have to navigate through the extra traffic that's through there already, or they have to go around cars, or whichever it may be. So I just am absolutely against this, and I thank y'all for y'all's time.
Thank you.
You have anyone else that'd like to speak for or against?
I'm Kathy Redman. I live in the house that's just north of where the development was both proposed and has already been permitted to R4. I wanted to talk a little bit about the traffic situation, because our neighborhood is a neighborhood of pedestrians. It's a neighborhood of bicyclists. People walk their dogs, people walk themselves, people walk with their friends and their family members. The issue is they have to walk in the street. There's no sidewalks. And so when we're impacting that area with more people living in multifamily units, you're of course creating more traffic that's going to be driving in and out. I'm in a situation right now, the house that I bought up there, I started out as a renter. Several years back, the driveway, the owner, John Anderson, received permission to move the driveway from Burke Street onto Harris because he owned that land. It was all his. The reason he sought permission to move it is because there is a hill and then there's a curve, and the driveway, the only place that driveway can go on my property and not be on someone else's land is back where it used to be. There's a hill in front of my house, and then there's the place that the original driveway was moved from. And again, it was moved because it was a blind exit. You couldn't leave that property in a safe way. The mail carrier couldn't stop to deliver mail to come to a full stop on the street because, again, there's a curve and a hill. And so my driveway was put where it came out onto Harris. Now I am in a position of being told I have to put back in the original place because that lot was already zoned to R4. Multifamily units are already going in there on the corner, and I no longer will have access. And so I've already started trying to find someone to put the driveway back where it used to be. But I do have concerns because I'm an old lady, and I'll be pulling out and at a blind exit every time I leave my property. And so there are issues when you impact a neighborhood with more multifamily units, and it does increase the traffic. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The zone, ma'am,
He had a question for you.
Could you come back? We have a question for you.
quick question. The lot you were talking about that's already zoned R4, is that the one at Harrison Burke?
Yes, it is. It's on the very corner, and my house is the yellow house on the hill north,
516?
516, yeah.
There's a little map here, so we're looking at.
Okay. And if you look at that map, I think you can see where the driveway used to be. And that's at the very edge of my property. And because of the hill, it's the only place it can go. And so it's going to have to be put back. And I'm hoping that in the future, there's some way to make it safer, either a speed bump or something. Because I have a screened-in porch that I sit out on the front of the house. And some people do observe the neighborhood speed limit. A lot of people don't. And they drive very, very fast around that curve and on that hill there. And then there's the drive. That's where it's gonna
Thank
be.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us know.
Thank you. Thank all of you. We have anyone else that would like to speak for or against before we move to our next item?
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Cedric Edwin. I stay at 816 Harris Creek, and I'm against the property because we already having a little traffic is speeding already down on Harris Creek while the little young kids are sort of playing out in the street, and then by adding this, that will really cause a big problem because, like I said, most cars are sort of parked on the side of the road, and the kids are trying to play. But bringing this in, I just feel like it will cause some tragedy, because of the speed that most young people are driving now. And so I'm really against this duplex. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Right. We have anyone else? All right.
Hi. I'm Tracy Eastep. I live at 602 Margaret. The 20% covers part of my yard. I was not able to get my written response in, but I am opposed to the property as well. We have been in the property for going on 7 years now, and I don't want to repeat what everyone else has said, but just to highlight some of my highest concerns. The speeding down Harris is such an issue. Cars go actually so fast and motorcycles that it rattles the windows of my house. So having a multifamily unit on that street, especially where there will be a high probability of having children, we don't have sidewalks. We have an enormous amount of foot traffic. There's people that walk from further down Harris. They're going to the dollar store or to Berkshire Brothers to get groceries. They're daily walkers. Just infrastructure, our roads in that area are awful. So the added traffic with that, with potholes. I know the city they subcontracted for someone to do utility work behind the Berkshire Brothers on Virginia Avenue. We had to deal with trenches in the road for over 2 months. It took me 3 weeks to get a hold of the Public Works City Manager. But once I was able to get a hold of Carl, he was wonderful, and we now have it patched. It's not fixed, but it's patched, at least for the time being. So I have a real big concern with all the extra traffic. If our roads aren't maintained as it is, how will it be going forward with that? And also with the rundown multifamily housing further down Harris that Maggie Forbes had mentioned, I'm pretty sure it's a code violation and needs to be demolished at this point. And so whenever I envision this new property coming in, I'm envisioning what's already down Harris that needs to be torn down for a lot of safety reasons. So I'm very much opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We're gonna close it out on this one if it's all right. You don't have to, but
It's Philip Blackburn. I actually live on Logansport Street, but I just wanted to bring your attention to something. It's a phenomenon that I've discussed before. It was in a recent letter to the editor. This R4 that's in the neighborhood now goes back to 1970. It was the original planning and zoning map when it started. And this application here demonstrates the phenomena that I talk about. When R4 gets started in a neighborhood, it starts growing until it consumes the whole neighborhood. Because R4 is a commercial form of residential. The person who's wanting the R4, he's not going to build a house there to live in. He's building that for rental property. Okay, and so then it becomes a thing of math. Why would you have a house on a lot in a single-family residential neighborhood that's valued at $150,000, $200,000 when you can build $1 million apartment complex there? Okay, so then it just starts growing. And I suspect that the one on the corner, the recent approval of R4, no doubt they use the R4 that's around there as justification for that R4. And so that's how it starts growing. That R4 that was done in 1970 had no business being zoned R4 because there was no R4 within a mile of that. It's a classic case of spot zoning. So what I would recommend that the P&Z Commission do is review the zoning in our neighborhoods, and where you have cases of this legacy R4 zoning. You know, those guys didn't know exactly what they were doing in 1970 because they'd never done it before. So they created these. Do you think they made some mistakes? Maybe they made some mistakes. I think having that lot zone as R4 originally was a big mistake. And it's been sitting there like a ticking time bomb for all these years, and now it's coming to be a problem for this neighborhood. So I suggest going into these neighborhoods and looking at these zonings that were done in 1970 that probably weren't appropriate. That's a classic case of spot zoning. And rezone those so we don't keep having these problems. That's my suggestion.
Thank you.
good, good. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pat Castella, and I also live on Logansport Street, but I was asked to advise because I know a lot about zoning, and so this is what I want to say. I'm definitively opposed to the rezoning request, and these are my reasons. The people here don't want it. They're the people that live in the neighborhood. The developers that come in and zone do it for profit. That's their rationale. I am not saying every developer is evil. I am saying that if you come into an R2 or an R1 neighborhood and you want to put up multifamily, duplexes, whatever, it's not for the neighborhood. The second thing is that R2 should stay R2. And I appreciate your serving on the board. I've served on zoning boards. And I hope that you will listen to the people and not to the developers, because sadly, I moved here 18 years ago, and I have seen nothing but developers intruding in neighborhoods, not following the comprehensive plan, not following the zoning rules, and not giving a you-know-what about what they do to the neighborhood. They then leave the neighborhoods, but we are left with what is done. Okay, now, our older neighborhoods are being destroyed because they're not subdivisions with rules. We all don't have the luxury of being able to move into a high-dollar subdivision with all sorts of rules. We are living in the older neighborhoods. This is an older neighborhood, but we love our neighborhoods. Zoning runs with the land. So when you rezone, the developer could sell that in the morning and make a profit. That's the way it works. Zoning's where the money is. Also, the other problem is that you'll get arguments, and you'll hear arguments about infill and tax base. No, we need to preserve our neighborhoods. We need to allow the people that love the neighborhoods make the decision. Not staff, not negating staff, but saying they're not the people in the neighborhoods. We don't have any form of conversation between neighborhoods. We don't even have it going now for the comprehensive plan. So we need to be what we are. Nacogdoches, a beautiful city, a lovely city, historic city that is blighted with things that don't look very historic because of bad zoning. And to answer the 200-foot rule, The reason it's never been used before is that most people don't know a thing about it. In Duncanville, where I was on the zoning board, we included in the 200-foot letter, and we stated in the letter that as a 200-foot abutter, you have a right to a written objection, and with that objection, you can get the supermajority rule. So I am very appreciative that things have gotten much better in our zoning department, but I am not happy about spot zoning all over the place here. And I hope as a board that's new and caring, that you will think about the neighborhoods, not about the developers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and your concerns and good information, and I'm sure that planning and zoning will be utilizing some of those suggestions that were made because we want to make our community livable and better for everybody that lives here. That's our objective.
And Commissioner Mills, I just want to clarify one thing that I stated earlier. So when Mrs. Forbes was talking about the denial with prejudice, so if the Planning and Zoning Commission chose to make a recommendation for denial with prejudice, and then it goes to City Council, and they also deny with prejudice, the zone change could only come back within a year if it was less intense or less dense than the request. So for instance, the applicant is requesting R4, so they could come back with another zone change, but it would have to be R3 or something less intense if it's denied with prejudice. Now, if it's just denied without any indication of whether it's for prejudice or not, then they still can't submit a zone change application unless there's been some actual change in conditions of the property or the surrounding area. So either way, there's a condition about resubmitting within a year. If it's denied with prejudice, that means that they can resubmit in a year, but it has to be a less intense or less dense zoning than what was denied previously. So they couldn't apply for R4 again. If there's no indication of whether it's for prejudice or not, they can reapply, but there actually has to be demonstrated change in conditions of the property or zoning principles or surrounding area, and they have to demonstrate that in writing. So I just wanted to clarify that for the commission because I think I misspoke a little bit earlier.
Can I ask a question? Does one of us need to request that it be submitted for denial with prejudice? Or how does somebody need to formally request that?
No.
Okay.
No, sorry. To answer Ms. Forst's question, she was asking if one of the residents had to formally request that the commission recommend denial with prejudice, and they don't. That's the prerogative of the commission. You can accept the withdrawal. You can make a recommendation to deny the request with prejudice, or just a simple recommendation to deny the request. And so that is the prerogative of the commission. And then we'll take that recommendation to City Council. And just as a note, there were some recommendations that were made by some of the residents about kind of coordination between neighborhoods and developers when we're looking at these applications. We are looking at, and we'll talk about it at the end of the meeting, bringing forward a work session in February to talk about requiring neighborhood meetings for certain types of zone change requests, requiring an extension between the time that they submit and the time that it actually goes before a board to allow for additional coordination. So we will be talking about that, bringing that back in February to incorporate some of those more neighborhood-friendly policies into our zone change process. So that way we have more time to review, we have more time to talk to the neighborhood, and before we're taking these forward, because oftentimes when we're actually drafting the staff report and publishing it, we're still getting letters from the neighborhood, and still getting phone calls. And so making that a longer time frame to allow more time for that public input before we're actually putting all that together and packaging it for that commission. Because we want to get you these things in a timely manner so you have time to review them before the meeting, but we also want to make sure that we're taking time to make sure that we hear from the residents if they do have any public comments. So just comment on some of those comments that were made. So, and we'll talk about that at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Lena.
Question, Lena. The adjacent lot that's R4, how long has it been R4?
We went back and looked at the historical zoning. Whenever I looked at the 1970 zoning map, that actually was shown as single family. It looks like sometime between 17 and 18 was when that zone change was made. I haven't identified the actual ordinance yet, but just looking at some of the historical mapping, that's whenever we saw that change reflected on the zoning map. So once, we're hoping to actually find the ordinance. Our record keeping has changed over the last few years, so it's been a little bit more difficult to find the actual adoption date, but it looks like between 17 and 18 was when that was changed.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Elena. Ms. Elena have given us kind of some directions on what we need to do, so back to the.
Sorry, I'd like to have a discussion.
We ready for discussion?
Yes,
About
perfect.
this?
Okay.
With our P and Z.
Oh, sorry.
We ready for discussion?
Well, do we, let's, I think we need to actually make a recommendation, get a second, and then we can open it up for discussion amongst the commission. Sure.
I'd like to make a motion that we deny this with prejudice.
I second.
I'll third.
And now we can open it up for information.
It's been moved and seconded that we deny this with prejudice. All in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. All right.
It's
On,
official.
all right, on to the next item. Thank you.
All right.
So we can have a discussion about
Yes.
this.
For discussion.
Yes, so the next item, I'm sorry, Commissioner Mills, I'll let you read the item, and then we'll move on to the next.
Did you want to ask?
I did want to have a discussion, Elena.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, sorry. You took the action, so I thought we were going to have, yes, let's go ahead and have the discussion.
Okay,
Sorry.
I just wanted to address all of you guys because I do see familiar faces out here tonight. And I did mention to Ms. Forbes and a couple of people who were here earlier, one of the biggest things that I'm proud of looking at when I see this community is that neighborhoods are gathering together to talk about what they want in their community and with their neighbors. And this creates a strong community for Nacogdoches, which makes us proud to serve for y'all because we can't do all the work ourselves and we want to hear from you guys. Now, concerning the master plan, this is exactly what neighborhoods need to do in order to affect change and planning for what we want for Nacogdoches. You know, I sat and I looked at the GIS maps like Mr. Blackburn had suggested that we do. And I stared at Nacogdoches for a while, contemplated places that needed to be looked at, and then made my own determinations about what I felt Nacogdoches, how we should grow and foster that change. We are doing the best that we can to serve y'all publicly, and we appreciate you guys coming out here and speaking on behalf of the neighborhood, and it takes courage. And over here, she said this is the most adult thing she's ever done, but you did a great job, and we're really proud of y'all, so thank you.
All right. All right.
You're going to be a good public speaker.
All right. Thank you. We moving on to the next public hearing. On our agenda, consider a zone change from R2 single family to R4 Butham.
Sorry, R3.
All right, wait a minute, let me see. I'm at the wrong one. Public hearing, this is C, public hearing. Consider a zone change from R2 family, single family to R3 two family for lots 3, 2, 3, 3A, and 4 on Block 2 of Driver Simpson addition located at 735 Harris Street and 811, 817 Ford Street. This request had been submitted by Guadalupe Salias of Universal Construction and Remodeling LLC, case file number ZON 2021-09.
All right, thank you, Elena Helton. As I said earlier, the applicant has also submitted withdrawal letter for this application as well, and staff is recommending denial of the request. We'll go ahead and just go through the contents of the packet, but just wanted to remind the commission. So, again, this property is located on the southeast corner of Ford Street and Hare Street. Again, this area is primarily developed and zoned as single family. There is some multifamily zoning to the north, which is vacant. Also, you'll see just kind of northeast of the property, there's an existing fourplex, which is legal nonconforming, which means it's something that was built and probably allowed at the time that it was built, but because of the current zoning, it wouldn't be allowed. So if that fourplex were to ever be demolished, they couldn't rebuild it as is. So it had to be redeveloped as single family. Same thing for the property just to the east. There's what we call a single dwelling unit multifamily development. It's actually 5 single dwelling unit structures. It is abandoned. It is actually a code compliance issue because they're not secured. Our code enforcement office has been working with that property owner. That property is and I don't want to get too much in the details, but we are working with them to try to at least secure the properties. It is going to be subject to a future sale, and trying to make it as secure as possible until the property is resold, so that way it can be redeveloped. Other than that, again, this is actually west of that senior housing, senior center, senior housing development in that zone change request that you just heard. So this is really more of mid-block along Harris Street. With that, the single-family residential is the future land use designation for the property. Duplex is included in the description of land uses that are allowed in single-family. However, as far as the existing development pattern, duplex would not be consistent with the overarching single-family character of the existing neighborhood. These are some photos of the subject property. 3 of the lots are developed with single-family structures, and one of them is vacant. And so this is actually on the hard corner. That's that blue home. And then the property actually adjacent to that along Harris Street is vacant. These are just some additional photos. You can see this is along Ford Street. Right across from the property on Ford Street is a manufactured home, and then the properties to the south are undeveloped. These are some additional photos taken along Harris and Ford. So again, on the upper left, that's the vacant lot right next to the house on the hard corner that is also subject to the zone change request. These are just some additional photos of the surrounding area. As far as the notifications, again, this property, we did place a zone sign on the property. We notified and sent written letters to all the property owners within 200 feet, and then we sent postcards to all the property owners within 500 feet. As far as the number of notices, there were 24 total written notices that went out to the adjacent property owners. When the staff report was updated, we had only received 1 written opposition, and then we received a phone response from the property owner just to the south that was recommending approval. Since then, we've received 3 additional letters that are written in opposition of the request, and so we'll talk about that 20% rule again. So again, this is 20% of that area, and so this would also trigger that supermajority vote. The blue indicates the land area that we've actually received written opposition for. And so similar to the one when we just heard, this would trigger the super majority rule. With that, when looking at the criteria for the zone change approval and compatibility, we look at the adjacent zoning and the adjacent land uses. While a duplex zoning is a step above the current R2 zoning designation, again, it's not consistent with what's built in the area. And the overarching desire of the neighborhood to maintain as much of that single-family character as possible that you see for the surrounding properties. The staff finds that it's not compatible with the area. As far as orderly growth and development, the surrounding properties are developed except for that lot to the south and southeast. However, the zone change wouldn't necessarily affect the ability of those properties to be developed in the future. There is infrastructure in the area with water and sewer along Harris and Ford Street. All of the existing driveways to those existing single-family homes are compliant with our current standards, and any future ones would also be subject to a duplex zoning if the request was approved. As far as nuisances, the proposed 2-family zoning shouldn't create a nuisance. However, there are no additional buffer standards for duplex zoning when it's adjacent to single-family zoning districts. Any landscaping and lighting would comply with current standards. Duplex zoning, unlike multifamily zoning, isn't required to provide streetscaping, so it'd be the same landscaping standards as single-family zoning. As far as the comprehensive plan, the single-family residential future land use designation does describe duplex as a appropriate land use in single-family residential. However, the comprehensive plan also talks about protecting and preserving the character of existing neighborhoods. So in that regard, it would not be in compliance with the land use policies that are outlined in the 2003 comprehensive plan. And so with that, that concludes staff's presentation. Again, we are recommending denial of the request, and the applicant has also withdrawn the application. So the Planning and Zoning Commission could choose to accept the withdrawal, and then we could take that forward to City Council on the 18th. The Commission could also make a recommendation to deny with prejudice, which would trigger that requirement that we just talked about, that they couldn't resubmit in a year unless it was a less intense zoning, or you could still recommend denial without any kind of indication of prejudice, and they still couldn't resubmit within a year unless there was an actual change in the conditions of the property. With that, I'd like to open it up for questions from the commission, and then we can hold the public comment portion if the prerogative of the commission.
Mr. Chairman, I assume that most of the folks here, the same ones that spoke, were going to be in opposition to this. Can we acknowledge their opposition and not make them have to repeat?
Yeah. We can, but we want to give them an opportunity to let them know they could speak, but they don't have to.
We heard them.
Yeah, okay. All right, does the commission have any questions of staff at this time? Okay.
Since we are utilizing the public hearing requirement, that we're going to give you the opportunity to speak, but you really don't have to if you're saying the same thing about the same property. I mean, about some other property. You got some specific information you can give us? Okay.
Maggie Forbes and 607 Burke Street, and I'm going to be extremely brief. I own the little orange house that's adjacent to the subject properties, and that's why I'm a 200-footer. But I'm just going to request that you deny with prejudice on this as well, because I know everybody around there was in opposition as far as I know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ford. And Elena had already talked to us that there are plans with comprehensive plannings that the community and the people who are doing construction and work together so you won't have these community shocks with these zone change, which will help a lot. If you talk about these things, then you won't have to have Ms. Carroll waiting to hear what y'all disagree on. I think that, you know, that's what we're here for. We are here to work with the community as well as the city so we can do what's best for the community peoples, because people in the community have to live in those places. So we want you to be comfortable and be free and happy so you can pay more taxes. We don't want you upset paying more taxes. So y'all get my point. And that's what because I've served several years on the board, and it was not too many cases we ran into that it was not some solution to a situation with people who have, you know, all their facilities functioning. You can solve problems in the community because we're here to live together. So plans are that we can eliminate some of these problems. Thank you for all of your public hearings. We're moving on for any discussion with staff.
Yep. Did you have something?
No, just make sure nobody else had anything.
This ends our public hearing.
All right, so with that, we're looking for a motion and recommendation from the commission.
Do we have any discussion before we go into?
You know,
Have a motion first.
yeah.
Yeah, a motion and a second, short discussion, and then vote.
I will make a motion to actually deny with prejudice.
Any discussion?
Yes, I actually wanted to say again, you know, talking about the master plan and everything that's happening, what we're doing here is very vital to listening to your decisions on how you want to take and preserve historic areas of Nacogdoches. You know, things that you want to talk about in terms of streets, speed bumps, things like that. That comes when you come together and talk about that as a community. We are able to address that with you guys and make notes so that we can actually start looking at places too, like the ordinance codes that we have hired on, as the city has hired on, to look at the rubble that has now been in your neighborhood. I looked down on Google Maps and it looked like people were still living there, but that was in 2016. And so it's been a while since then. And so driving down that street also and seeing those things. So once again, like Commissioner Mills has said, we are thankful for your community and your voice, and we want to address all those things that you have concerns about.
Any more discussion?
No, sir.
All right. Can we get a vote on all those in favor of denying this with restrictions? Let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, and so on.
All right, Commissioner Mills, do we want to call Commissioner
Brother King.
Deppish? Yes.
Kenneth?
Yeah.
He can handle it. Yeah, he always leave me with these.
You missed the party, kid.
I see how it is, everybody leaves. All right. We're down to 60 on the regular agenda.
Yes, do we want to allow just for a moment for the rest of the attendees for the previous zone changes to just
Sure.
clear the room, because it's just difficult to hear?
You're saying they're being too loud?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and for the people watching online, I want to be able, for everyone to be able to hear the,
No, that's no
hear
problem.
the discussion.
Okay, so, thank you, Mr. Mills, for filling in. 6D, public hearing, consider a zone change from B2 general business to R2 single family for lots 17 and 18 of Brook Hollow Addition, Section 1, located on the west side of Brook Hollow Drive and approximately 140 feet north of Ridgewood Drive. This request has been submitted by Antonio Huerta, and it's case file ZON 2021-10.
All right, thank you, Elena Helton, City Planner. This property includes 2 lots, approximately 0.38 acres, that are contiguous and located on the west side of Brook Hollow Drive. This subdivision was actually developed back in 1969, prior to the adoption of our first official zoning map, and then deed restrictions were put in place to limit the development of the area to single family. Then in 1970, we adopted a zoning ordinance and our first official zoning map, and that area in general, in property that had frontage along Northeast Stallings and the surrounding area, was zoned B2 general commercial. The idea was that this area was planned for future commercial development, and so generally they zoned the area as commercial. However, this property is still developed and characterized as a single-family neighborhood. The deed restrictions are still in place that limit the development to single-family. These lots aren't, the size and configuration of them don't actually lend themselves to commercial development, and they don't have direct frontage onto a commercial corridor. And so they really do lend themselves more for single-family development, just like what's there today. And so back in August, City Council actually approved a zone change for the lots that you see in yellow, from B2 to single family, and we've already approved a number of permits for those properties. So some of them are still vacant, some of them are being developed, and the property owner wishes to continue that development pattern for these 2 lots. And so the future land use plan does designate this area as rural development. This is from the 2003 comprehensive land use plan. This is probably primarily due to it's on the perimeter of the city limits. This property doesn't have as much infrastructure because the area just simply hasn't been developed. However, with the I-69 corridor, and you can kind of see it in the lower east, the lower left-hand corner, you can actually see the flyover that we actually anticipate this area to be developed as commercial in the future. However, that shouldn't impact the existing character of Brook Hollow Drive. And so while the future land use plan is called out as rural development, that's likely due to the lack of infrastructure and just general area not being developed. So for just some reference, this is some site photos of the existing area. So the applicant had actually submitted building permits for these lots and had started some site work. Then when we realized that we actually need to stop and go through that zone change process. And so you'll see there has been some site work done, but we have put a stop work order on those permits until we can get the zoning correct and they can move forward with construction of the property. These are just some additional photos. The properties immediately to the east are still undeveloped. However, we are seeing interest in infill, and so we will probably see additional permits for those properties that are already zoned for single family. These are some additional photos. These are the properties, actually on the upper left, that's at the end of Brook Hollow Drive, and where Ridgewood Drive is located. So that area is actually primarily manufactured homes, which is still single family in character as far as density, but that is a different development type. To the north, you see the lower right-hand corner photo. Those are those traditional single-family homes that are there today. As far as notices, this property was subject to the additional courtesy notices, so a zone sign on the property, courtesy notices for property owners within 500 feet, and then the 200-foot letters that we sent, those written letters, we did 3 of those, and we look at the map, you'll see there's multiple lots. Well, those are under common ownership. And so when you have multiple lots under common ownership, we send 1 letter instead of 3 of the same. And so that's why there's actually only 3 letters, even though there's multiple parcels. Several of those are owned by the same person. And so we did receive 1 written letter in favor of the request, and that was included in your packet. And then we received a couple of phone calls with just general inquiries about what the request was. And then once we explained what the request was, and there wasn't any kind of concern from those adjacent property owners. As far as criteria for approval, we find that the request is compatible with the area. This will reflect the current zoning of the property to the north, as well as just the general development character of the neighborhood. As far as orderly growth and development, there are surrounding vacant properties, but they are being developed as single family. This request will not affect that orderly growth and development because there already is infrastructure in place as far as water, street, and sewer. And all those properties have adequate access and are suitable for development. As far as nuisances, additional single family won't create a nuisance because it'll be in line with the character of the existing neighborhood. Any kind of future lighting or landscaping or parking will comply with our current standards. And while the request isn't necessarily in compliance with the future land use plan, it does further some of the land use policies, goals, and objectives of the comprehensive plan as far as incurring infill and development, and then promoting growth where we already have adequate infrastructure, as well as promoting zoning that is compatible with the adjacent neighborhood and that existing development character. And so the applicant is also in attendance if the commission has any questions. And with that, I'll conclude our presentation and open it up for questions from the commission.
Thank you, Elena.
Hmm? Does the commission have any questions?
No questions.
Okay.
Anybody want to hear from the applicant?
I mean,
No?
we can, but we no need.
No? Okay. All right, anybody want to make a motion on this one?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
A second.
All right, so we have a motion to approve the zone change from B2 to R2 as written here in ZON 2021-10. Any discussion? Nope. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much for coming, Mr. Huerta. Moving on to number 7, City Council decisions on planning and zoning cases. There were no cases in December heard by the City Council. And so we're moving on to number 8, discussion of possible action on future agenda items.
Thank you, Ken. So I did want to have a brief discussion with the commission in February. We're going to be bringing forward a work session to address some of the concerns that you had or that you heard this evening about the proposed zone changes on Harris Street. And so one of the things that we're going to be looking at is requiring neighborhood meetings when someone is requesting a zone change that is two categories above the existing. So for instance, if someone's, instead of going from R2 to R3, if they're going to R2 to R4, then that's automatically going to require a neighborhood-wide meeting prior to this item coming to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Also requiring pre-development meetings for all zone changes that are more intense or more dense than what's there today. The zoning ordinance recommends that applicants come in and meet with staff for a pre-development meeting or pre-application conference to discuss the merits of the request, discuss infrastructure, just discuss in general the appropriateness of the zoning for that property, but it's not required. So by policy, we could require that anytime we get a zone change application that met that. We're also going to talk about requiring longer timelines from the time an application is submitted to the time that it's actually brought forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission. We actually have a policy that outlines the deadline for a zone change application before it's heard, and it's very short. Essentially, it's just enough to review the application, make sure it's complete, and do the notices. But we would like to incorporate more time so staff can do additional analysis, reach out to the neighborhood if it's necessary, and have those additional meetings that we talked about, and not feel like we're having to, work against the clock, because our policies say that if you submit at this time, you're going to this meeting. Also, part of that is a discussion about having 2 regular meetings a month instead of 1. So, for example, City Council meets the first and third Tuesday of every month. We only meet the second Monday. If we added an additional regular meeting, it doesn't mean we have to have that meeting, but it means that we would have more flexibility for bringing things forward to the commission as far as deadlines and managing that agenda, so that maybe when we have more meetings, but they're not as long. Or we can incorporate additional work sessions and policy discussions instead of having to wait for a month or having an applicant wait for a month if we know that the neighborhood supports the request. And so that's going to be a work session that we're going to bring forward on February 14th, and we'll talk about it holistically. And so when we talk about extending these deadlines, adding more meetings, for the applicant, I think having more opportunities to meet with the commission will help offset some of those concerns with delayed requests and things that we've historically had issues with in the past. And so I just wanted to give the commission a heads up, and if there's anything else that the commission would like to incorporate into that agenda item, we can talk about that briefly. We won't discuss it or deliberate it, but we can add topics to that work session. We can talk about it today, or you can just let me know, send me an email, hey, I also want to talk about this as part of that discussion.
Meetings are a great idea. I lived for 40 years in an older neighborhood, and one of the ways we kept things kind of at bay, to be honest with you, at the city and zoning changes, was we all talked to each other and met together and presented a, united front. And I think that a lot of these issues would not get to be such a upset to the neighborhood if they knew in advance what was happening.
Well, and if staff was aware of the concerns of the neighborhood before we're actually issuing the packet, our recommendation would change. And so, sometimes when we're publishing this, we're trying to get it to you in a timely manner so you can review it before the meeting, but we still haven't received all the public comment from the community. So that'll allow more time for us to get all that public input, so we can make sure it's accurately reflected in the.
About whether or not the sewer or the water will support what they want to do. I mean, there are a lot of other issues involved sometimes.
Exactly, and so just because a property is physically appropriate for development doesn't mean that it should still receive an affirmative recommendation from staff. Because we do want to make sure that it's compatible, that it's not taken away from the character of the neighborhood, because that is a quality of life issue, and we want to make sure that we're protecting those residents as well. So I think additional meetings, extending the deadlines will help address some of these issues that we've had in the past. Any questions from the commission?
Are you going to bring candy since it's February the 14th?
I will bring candy.
I was
Chocolate.
gonna see how long the meeting was gonna be.
I'll make a note, Juan, we're going to bring chocolate.
Elaine, I did want to say something too about these work sessions. One of the things Maggie Forbes addressed was that knowing that they needed more lower income housing because of urban sprawl. But, I think we can definitely talk about planned development in the right ways to be able to do something like that, as opposed to incorporating small little zone changes within a neighborhood. And where potentially that could happen in Nacogdoches, because You know, I look around and we're not gonna ever get to the Austin size, I hope not. But like a Mueller development was just so incredibly, beneficial to that city. They took an unused area of an unused airport and they put these homes that were affordable for people, and they actually did multifamily as well, and they incorporated a whole little city center that people love living in, and they walk around in it, and I think there's areas in Nacogdoches that we can do that with, and it's smart planning. And I'd love to discuss something like that too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we have talked about, you know, doing some PDs for these smaller lots. Historically, those PDs have been intended more for like your true, like kind of comprehensive plan developments for your larger tracts. We historically haven't used them or have, it's been appropriate to use them in smaller properties because sometimes people have misused them because
Right.
they want a variance to a development requirement, or they just want a variance to land use. Well, it's not appropriate for that.
Right.
But similar to the, some of the other, you know, properties, when you have infill and there's a mix of zoning and land uses, and it's appropriate to incorporate sensitive development regulations to address those issues, they can still accommodate that land use, well then, that's an appropriate use of a planned development district.
Sure.
And so we have had those discussions where, in light of completely updating our zoning code, in the meantime, maybe promoting some of these planned developments in these smaller areas so we can have a comprehensive evaluation and update of the zoning code to include more context-sensitive development and things
Great.
like that. And that's something that'll be evaluated during this comp plan process as well.
Perfect. I think it's just good for people to be a part of it if they come to our work sessions to even understand how that would work too.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, we will include that PD discussion
okay,
in February.
thank you.
There's one of the things that I think didn't get addressed from what I could hear through the door tonight was people talked about that on Harris Street. There's a 712, I think, is like a compound of
Yes.
old huts or whatever it is that's just vacant. I assume that it's like that because the only thing you could go back and redevelop there is a single-family home.
Yes.
And maybe the economics don't make sense. And so now we're left with a lot that looks awful that we can't get anybody to clean up.
Yeah.
And if we did go in and bulldoze it, the city would pay the money to do it, and then we just have an empty lot.
Yes, and so that is an ongoing case, and so I'll speak to it in a little bit more detail. So it's a single-family lot, and there's 5 individual structures on that lot.
Yeah.
And so each structure is a single dwelling unit. But, you know, in single family, we only allow 1 unit per lot. And so when those become vacant, when those sit vacant for 6 or more months, well, it negates any kind of grandfather status that they had. And so you can't go in and repair, you can't renovate, you can't do anything with it unless you're bringing it into full compliance, which means tearing it all down and just building a single-family lot. And so that can deter someone from redeveloping it because the cost to actually tear everything down can be more than the cost to build something new. That particular property, that is in the process of being sold because of tax default. And so we have approached that property owner to at least secure the facility. Now, it's a delicate issue because if we take that initiative, well, that can actually delay that tax resale, so we don't want to do that. And so we're trying to work with them to at least secure the property so we can get that property resold to get it redeveloped. The city could condemn it and demolish it and put a lien on the property, which would even make it more expensive for resale. So we are in the process trying to bring it into compliance while not delaying kind of the redevelopment of that lot. Does that make sense? And so it is something that we've been working with the property owner on.
Yeah, I guess the reason I brought it up is that I'd like to know what are our options as a city to go in and address those types of eyesore lots and do something about them.
Yeah, there are several properties like that where we have gone in and demolished it and placed a lien on the property. So if the property wasn't in the scenario where it was about to be up for resale, then we would just move forward and take it to the Building Standards and Commission, condemn it, demolish it, place a city lien on it, and then whoever purchased it would be responsible for reimbursement of that. And so we've done that for several other properties in town. This one is just in a kind of precarious scenario where we're trying not to delay any redevelopment that may happen in the immediate near future. And so, yeah, you'll see lots of things like that in town where there are vacant properties. Oftentimes you have properties that are inherited by people that aren't locals, and so it's
Yeah, you see a lot of
difficult
that.
trying to work with them to, repair properties and so it's not uncommon for the city to take something forward to our Building Standards Commission, have it condemned, remove the structures, and then place a lien.
Okay. I'd like to know more about that.
Yeah.
Maybe that we can add that as
Okay.
a part of our work session
Okay,
and figure out
part
how.
of this particular session?
I don't know, or maybe one of the future
Well, I think,
items we have coming up,
yeah, I think
wherever you think it fits in.
I think I can provide a couple of slides and just kind of like a brief overview of that process, and then if we want to get into the weeds, we can do that. We don't have anything pending for the next meeting, so we can dedicate more time to that work session. Or if you decide you want a lot more detail, then we can have just another one that just talks about that process in general. We are planning on taking a work session to City Council in late February, just to talk general about code. The city just got finished conducting a windshield survey about a month ago, where we did a citywide canvas of all our zoning code issues to identify the types of zoning code issues that we're having, kind of the concentration of those, and how we can be more strategic in how we address those. And so we're going to talk to council about some of those strategies where we can maybe work with and partner with some of the other organizations in our community to address those.
Okay. That's gonna be, which
That's
council
going to be
meeting?
the last February meeting.
Okay.
It's tentatively scheduled for that
Right,
last meeting,
right.
but we will, we'll let the commission know exactly when we're going to do that.
Great, I'd like to hear that.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, does the commission have any other questions or items they'd like to bring forward for a future agenda topic or discussion?
Thanks for putting all that packet together. It was a big one.
So at the next meeting, we will be utilizing Civic Clerk. And so Civic Clerk is an agenda software that City Council uses. And we've been working with our IT department to work out some technical issues that we've had with our templates and setting that up for the Planning and Zoning Commission. So we'll be using that software next. So instead of having a full PDF that you have to go through, you'll actually have it broken down into different links to each section, and you can just pan directly to those different sections without having to go through 25 pages to get to whatever you're looking for. It'll be a much more user-friendly agenda, not just for the commission, but for the public as well.
Awesome.
So just be looking for that, and we'll send you some information ahead of time to kind of give you like a little tutorial. It's very intuitive, but if you have any questions, just don't hesitate to reach out.
Great,
Thank you.
all right. I guess we are adjourned at 6:32. All right. Thank you very much.